Hi, I'm Raphael, now 38 years old, but let me take you back about 6 years, to when I lived in Brooklyn, New York. I was that electrician the big construction guys called when no one else wanted to touch the job. Climbing 30-story scaffolding, opening substation panels in the middle of the snow, facing cutting winds on top of Manhattan buildings. And I did it with my chest out, because to me, life was just technique, electrical current, calculations, and courage. God, Jesus, faith. I mocked all of it. When someone on the job site mentioned prayer, I'd fire back right away. Show him to me right here and I'll believe on the spot. I grew up watching my Brazilian mom pray novenas in the living room, but when I hit my teenage years, I locked all of that away in a drawer and threw the key out. Religion, to me, was just fear wrapped up like a gift. I lived on autopilot, man. Packed subway at 5 in the morning, 12-hour shift, happy hour at the neighborhood bar, rooftop barbecues with the boys in the summer. It all seemed fine. I had a paycheck that covered the bills, a decent apartment in Bushwick, a girlfriend who put up with me. But every now and then, when the city went quiet around 3 a.m., I felt a weight on my chest I couldn't explain. It wasn't depression, it wasn't physical exhaustion. It was a void no craft beer or end-of-month bonus could fill. I'd lie down staring at the ceiling thinking, is this really it? But then I'd shake my head and tell myself, cut it out, Raphael. Atheists don't sit around getting philosophical. I even had a nickname among the guys, the skeptic. When someone swore they'd seen an angel, I already had a joke lined up. Angel. Must have been a reflection off your hard hat, bro. I was the guy who corrected everyone, who explained everything through science and logic. If something weird happened, I instantly came up with a rational explanation. To me, the world was just matter, energy, coincidence. Miracles didn't exist, and divine intervention even less. I laughed at people who thanked God for surviving an accident. You lived because you got lucky or were fast, not because someone upstairs decided to help. I thought anyone who believed in God's presence just couldn't handle the harsh reality of life. I could. I was strong. I didn't need anyone invisible holding me up. At least that's what I repeated to myself every time that emptiness hit harder. I'd shove it down, swallow hard, and go back to work the next day like nothing had happened. But life turns around in ways you don't expect. I never imagined I'd be the one left with no rational explanation for anything. Back then, I was so sure I controlled everything. Little did I know the biggest shock of my life wouldn't come from a live wire, but from something that would burn every certainty I had all at once. It was a freezing Tuesday in February, the kind of day where the wind cuts through your bones even with 3 layers of clothing. I'd been called for an urgent job in an old commercial building in Lower Manhattan, near the financial district. The client was a company renovating the entire basement to install new servers. Heavy work, old wiring mixed with new, everything tight, dusty, dark. I got there at 7 in the morning, already complaining about the hour, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee that was burning my hand. Downstairs, everything smelled like diesel and hot metal. Me and 2 other guys, Luis and Mike, went down with our tools. There was a main panel that had been shorting intermittently for days, and the building owner didn't want to stop the project. Just fix it, Raphael, you're the best, he said. I laughed, puffed out my chest, and said, leave it to me, in 2 hours it'll be singing. I had no idea that in less than 2 hours I'd be singing something completely different. I started working on the high-voltage cables, forehead sweating even with the cold upstairs. There was a strange smell, stronger than usual, but I ignored it. I'd smelled worse. Suddenly, a dry crack, a blue flash that blinded everything, and then, the world turned into fire. A massive electrical explosion, the kind that turns air into plasma. I felt my body thrown backward, flames swallowing me whole, my coveralls catching fire like paper. The noise was deafening, a roar like hell opening its mouth. I screamed, but no sound came out. The heat was so intense I felt the skin on my face melting. I rolled on the ground trying to put out the flames, but they just rose higher. Luis and Mike had been thrown across the room. I heard their screams fading in the middle of the blast. In that second, I was absolutely sure. This was my end. In a fraction of a second, my life flashed before my eyes. My mom, my grandma praying, me laughing at them. And I thought, with terrifying clarity, so this is how it ends. And there's no one to save me, because no one up there exists. I closed my eyes, waiting for the pain to devour me completely, waiting to black out. But then, something happened that still makes every hair on my body stand up. In the middle of that sea of fire, I saw him. I was lying on my back on the basement floor, my whole body on fire, the air burning my lungs, the roar of the flames like a train running over me. I had already given up. My mind was screaming, "It's over, Raphael, it's over." But then, in the middle of that orange-red darkness, a different light appeared. Not an explosion flash. A white light, clean, calm, not blinding. And inside that light came a figure. I saw a man. Dressed in white, not a single stain, not a single burn. The flames licked at his feet, but didn't touch him. He walked over the fire as if he were stepping on morning wet grass. I blinked hard, thinking it was just my brain frying, hallucinating, but no. He was there, real, more real than the fire itself. And when he got close to me, the heat stopped. Stopped. I felt the fire pulling away from my body like someone had opened a window inside hell. He knelt down, looked straight into my eyes, and smiled. Not a smile at a poor guy burning, a smile from someone who knows every piece of your story. I knew that face. I'd seen it in my grandma's house, in church statues I made fun of. It was Jesus. And he didn't speak with his mouth at first. He spoke inside me, in my chest, in a voice so clear it felt like the whole world went silent so I could hear it. "Raphael, I brought you out of death so you could tell what you saw." Right then I started crying like a child. Crying for real, my face burning, but the tears came out cold. I tried to say, "Help me," but no sound came out. He placed his hand on my chest, right where the fire was still trying to eat me, and I felt a peace I had never felt in my life. It was like every fear, every pain, every emptiness I had carried since I was a teenager was sucked right out of me. All I could repeat in my mind was, "So you exist. You really exist." Then the white figure stood up, still walking over the flames, and slowly stepped back, as if saying, "Now it's your turn." The fire roared again, but it didn't touch me the same way. I just lay there watching him disappear into that light, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it had burst out of my chest. And that's when I heard the firefighters shouting upstairs, coming down the stairs with hoses, lights, frantic voices looking for survivors. I woke up with someone yelling my name and an oxygen mask on my face. Red emergency lights flashing on the low ceiling, hoses spraying water everywhere, radios crackling. 2 FDNY firefighters dragged me over the debris, and all I could repeat was a sentence I didn't even fully understand. "He walked in the fire. He walked in the fire." Outside, the February cold hit like a slap. Ambulances, squad cars, a reporter already filming, the whole building evacuated. They put me on a stretcher, cut off what was left of my burned clothes, and I heard the paramedic talking on the radio. "Conscious victim, severe burns on torso and limbs, but, wait, looks less severe than it should be." I laughed through the pain, a hoarse laugh, because I knew why. At Bellevue Hospital, the doctors were shocked. I had second-degree burns on less than 15% of my body. 15%. I was at the center of the explosion, man. The epicenter. The spot where the temperature hit over 1,000 degrees in a fraction of a second. Luis lost 3 fingers and had 60% of his body burned. Mike was in a coma for weeks. And me? I walked out with the skin on my face practically untouched. The fire chief, a big Italian guy named Tony, came to visit me the next day. He sat down, took off his cap, and spoke softly. "Raphael, I've been on the force 22 years. The circle where you were. The concrete cracked from the heat, the metal melted. Nobody comes out alive from that, let alone without severe burns. What happened down there?" I started crying again. I told him everything. The white figure, Jesus walking on the flames, the voice that spoke inside me. Tony stayed quiet for a long time, staring at the floor. Then he looked up with teary eyes and said, "I'm Catholic, but it's been a long time since I set foot in a church. I'm going today." He squeezed my hand and left. I never saw him again, but I know that day changed his life too. I stayed in the hospital for only 9 days. 9. The doctors had talked about months in the ICU, skin grafts, infection risks. But I recovered way too fast. Every day I felt a presence in the room, a peace I couldn't explain. I'd close my eyes and see him again, walking in the fire, smiling at me. And then I understood, that hadn't just been deliverance. It had been a calling. I left Bellevue with a backpack, a prescription for painkillers, and a body that felt new, yet a soul that didn't recognize anything anymore. The L train back to Bushwick had never been so loud. Every break, every announcement, every person yelling on their phone felt like it was accusing me. I got to my apartment, opened the door, and that was it. The smell of old beer, bottles in the sink, the Iron Maiden poster on the wall, the pile of bills. All of it belonged to someone else. I sat on the couch and cried like someone had ripped my skin off again, only this time it was the skin of my old life that was falling away. My girlfriend at the time, Jess, came home from work and found me sitting on the floor hugging my knees. She rushed to hold me, asking if I was in pain, if I needed medication. I lifted my face and said, "Jess, I saw Jesus. He walked on the fire for me. I can't live the way I lived before." She laughed, thought it was trauma, shock talking. After 2 days trying to convince me I needed a psychologist, she packed her things and left. Did it hurt? It hurt like hell. But I understood. Someone who didn't see what I saw couldn't walk beside me now. I started walking around the streets of New York like a ghost. I'd pass by bars that used to be my second home and feel sick. I'd get on the subway and start praying softly, not even knowing how to do it properly. One day, at Union Square, I saw a guy preaching on the steps with a cheap microphone. I stopped, sat on the ground, and listened to everything. When he finished, I walked up to him. "I saw Jesus in the fire," I said. The guy dropped the mic and hugged me right there. He took me to a small Hispanic church in the Bronx the same day. I walked in not knowing what to expect, and when the worship started, I dropped to my knees and cried so hard the floor got wet. It was like the presence of God I had felt in the flames had followed me there. But it wasn't all flowers. Some days the devil screamed louder than my newborn faith. Some nights I doubted everything, thought I'd gone crazy. Some guys from my old job laughed in my face. "Raphael turned religious? You." I lost work, lost friends, lost my identity. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered the voice. "I took you from death so that you would tell what you saw." So I'd breathe deep and keep going. And you, have you ever felt that moment when everything you built turns to dust, but at the same time you've never felt so alive? Have you ever had the courage to leave everything behind because you found something bigger? Tell me in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one, and your story might be someone's lifeline today. I didn't know where to begin. I only knew I couldn't stay silent. For weeks, I carried that secret like a burning coal in my pocket. It burned if I kept it to myself, but scared people when I opened my hand. One Sunday morning, I took the A train to Harlem and walked into a small Baptist church that smelled like coffee and old wood. At the end of the service, the pastor asked if anyone had a testimony. I raised my trembling hand. When I grabbed the microphone, my voice came out rough, but it didn't stop. I told everything: the basement, the fire, the white figure, the voice that spoke my name. When I finished, the whole church was silent, and then came the shouts of "Glory to God!" People crying, running to hug me. A lady around 70 held my face and said, "Son, the Lord marked you with fire to ignite other hearts." That broke me completely. The next week, people were already asking me to speak at other churches. In Queens, Brooklyn, even New Jersey. I'd go by subway, by bus, sometimes catching a ride, with a discreet scar on my arm and a Bible a brother had given me. At first I stuttered, sweat running down my back, thinking they'd call me crazy. But every time I shared, the same thing happened. Someone converted, someone came back to Jesus, someone who had been planning suicide gave up. I saw eyes filling with tears and I understood, it wasn't about me. It was about him using a broken ex-atheist to show that he still does miracles today. One night, after speaking at an overnight vigil in Newark, a skinny young guy came up to me. He was shaking. "I'm an atheist like you were. I only came because my mom dragged me here. But after what you told us, I want that Jesus who walks in the fire." We prayed right there in the parking lot, under a light rain, and he accepted Jesus crying like a child. When he lifted his face, I saw my own reflection from months earlier. That's when it hit me, the miracle hadn't been just for me. It had been for him, for so many others I didn't even know yet. And the change in my life got more and more radical. I stopped taking jobs in places I knew had shady stuff going on. I started fasting, reading the Bible until late at night, praying out loud in my room until the neighbor banged on the wall, and then apologized later and asked who this God was that made me shine like that. I felt God's presence so strongly that sometimes I had to stop in the middle of the street and cry. New York, once just noise and chaos, became the stage for the greatest love story of my life. Me and Jesus, more in love every day. A year and a half after the fire, a brother from the Bronx church recorded my testimony on a simple phone. I didn't even know he was filming properly. It was just me sitting on a plastic chair, dim light, speaking with a voice still a little rough from the scars in my throat. They posted it on YouTube with a silly title, Atheist Electrician Sees Jesus in the Middle of an Explosion, not clickbait. I didn't even have a channel, didn't even think about it. 2 days later the video had 100,000 views. A week later, 2 million. Today it's over 28 million. Messages started pouring in from everywhere. Japan, Nigeria, Germany, Argentina, Indonesia. People tagging me on Instagram crying in front of their screens, saying they accepted Jesus right there in their room, on the bus, in the hospital. A guy from Texas sent a photo of the gun he was going to use to end his life and said he threw it away after hearing, "I took you from death so that you would tell what you saw." A 16-year-old girl from Portugal wrote that she was a militant atheist, fought with her Christian mom every day, but after the video she apologized and got baptized. I'd read all that and fall to my knees in my New York apartment, because I could see the purpose unfolding in a way I never imagined. Today I travel the world telling this story. I've spoken in packed stadiums in Sao Paulo, in favelas in Rio, in underground churches in China, in conferences in London. Wherever I go, the fire that almost killed me becomes light that saves others. And you know what breaks me the most? Every time I tell it, I feel him again. The same presence of God that wrapped me in the flames wraps me on stage. It's like Jesus walks with me again, only now, over crowds. I'm no longer the skeptical Raphael who mocked faith. I'm a man marked by fire, alive by a miracle, in love with Jesus, and with one mission, to repeat what he commanded in that basement. Because if he took me from death so I would tell it, then every time I open my mouth, someone else is taken from death too. Spiritual death, emotional death, eternal death. And you, listening to me right now, have you ever stopped to think that maybe your greatest deliverance, your greatest transformation, is just waiting for a yes? Have you realized that maybe Jesus has already walked through your fire and you just haven't recognized him yet? Tell me in the comments, what was the day he visited you and you almost couldn't believe it? Because your story, just like mine, wasn't meant to stay hidden. It was meant to set the world on fire with the proof that he still lives, still walks in the fire, and still calls ex-atheists, ex-addicts, ex-lost souls by name.